The moment the judge said she was ready to rule, I stood up and handed her one single piece of paper. 30 seconds later, police rushed into the courtroom. They cuffed my husband right in front of our 13-year-old daughter. Hi, I'm Naomi. I was married for 15 years to a man I once trusted with everything until I discovered he'd hidden millions, and more than just money. Would you expose your ex in front of your child if it meant stopping him from hurting others? Tell me what you'd do. Would you stay silent or speak up when it matters most? Before the courtroom, before the police, before the headlines, there was just me, Naomi Calder, 41, mom, former corporate attorney, and until last year, wife of Trevor Calder, CEO of Hex and Vault, and a man everyone in Charleston seemed to admire. We had the house with the wraparound porch, the ocean blue mailbox Isla painted when she was 7, dinner on the table by 6:30, and matching outfits for every holiday photo. From the outside, our life was put together. Inside, it was more like a beautiful cage. Trevor wasn't abusive in the way people usually mean. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hit. He just rewrote the rules. He controlled our calendar. He decided where Ayla went to camp, what books she read, which neighbors were acceptable. He reviewed every budget spreadsheet like it was a war strategy. At first, I didn't mind. He was ambitious, efficient, always one step ahead. I told myself I was lucky until I started feeling like a guest in my own home. We met when I was clerking for a federal judge. He came to speak about data privacy. Wore a charcoal suit, had the charm of someone used to being the smartest in the room. By our second date, he said he saw partnership potential. By the 5th, he was showing me cash flow projections for a company he hadn't even named yet. I laughed. He didn't. Still, I married him, left my law firm, raised our daughter, helped him build Hex and Vault from our kitchen table to a $20 million valuation. But somewhere between milestone bonuses and venture funding, Trevor stopped being my partner and became my handler. When I'd ask questions about our savings, he'd say, "Don't worry your pretty little head about that, Nye." When I brought up joint decisions, he'd blink twice and reply, "You're emotional? Let's talk when you're calm." So I stopped asking, stopped talking, started shrinking. But Isla, she's 13 now, all legs and wild sketches. She sees more than she says. One night after dinner, she whispered, "Mom, why does Daddy have a phone he only uses in the garage?" I blinked. He had always been secretive about tech stuff. Security protocol, he said. But Isla had seen something maybe more than she realized. That night, as I loaded the dishwasher, I felt it. A shift, like something cold brushing the back of my neck. Trevor had started sleeping in the downstairs office for focus. His phone was always face down. He locked the filing cabinet we used to share. And I started waking up with a pit in my stomach. A gnawing sense that I'd built my life on paperwork I never read closely enough. I didn't know it yet, but something in our marriage had already expired. And the cost of pretending everything was fine was about to come due. The soup bubbled gently when my phone lit up. I wiped my hands still damp. One new message. Subject line, Calder v. Calder. My chest tightened. I opened it anyway. The words hit like glass shattering. Trevor had filed for divorce. No warning, no conversation, no goodbye. He wanted full custody, our home, my pension, even the car in my name. He called me emotionally unstable, said I wasn't fit to parent Isla. I read the motion again, then again. Each line erased another piece of me. That night, Trevor asked if I wanted more salt in the soup. He passed the bread like nothing happened, smiled like a man without guilt. I nodded. My throat couldn't form words. He laughed with Isla, talked about Atlanta, an upcoming tech summit. I sat across from him feeling like furniture he forgot to replace. After dinner, I tried logging into our bank account. Access denied. I tried the backup passcode. Still locked out. I texted him. "Naomi, did you change the login?" Trevor. "Yeah. System flagged something. I'll handle it." He always said that. I'll handle it. Like I was an inconvenience, not his wife. The next morning, I checked the Hex and Vault website. My name gone from the founding team. No photo, no bio, no record. I scrolled through the press archive. Articles I helped write disappeared. I called Marissa, the CFO. I trained myself. She lowered her voice. "I thought you stepped away, Naomi." Months ago, I hung up. Stared down the hallway. Framed photos lined the wall. Our wedding, Isla's first ballet. Smiles that didn't age well. He wasn't divorcing me. He was deleting me. Systematically, strategically, from his company, from our accounts, from our story. But Trevor forgot one thing. I don't vanish quietly, and I don't forget. Not the passwords, not the documents, not the lies. He rewrote the narrative, but I still had the original, and I knew exactly when to read it out loud. Isla sat on the couch sketching in her notebook, pencil tapping against the spine. I watched her draw lines that made no sense. Circles inside circles, like someone trying to speak in code. She didn't look up, didn't say hello, just kept drawing. I sat beside her slowly. "What are you working on?" She shrugged. "Nothing really." Her eyes stayed down. Then she added, "Daddy said I shouldn't tell you." My stomach tightened. "Tell me what?" I kept my voice calm. "What did he say you shouldn't tell me, honey?" She traced over a dark spiral. "That his friend Alex is helping with work stuff." I blinked. "Alex," she nodded. "He comes to Dad's office when I'm there. Sometimes he brings smoothies." "Smoothies? Of course. Make it feel normal." I smiled carefully. "Do you know his last name?" She shook her head. "Just Alex. He has an accent." "What kind of accent?" She paused. "Like, not from here." The back of my neck prickled. I had never heard of Alex, not once in 15 years. I checked Trevor's calendar that night. Nothing. No Alex. No appointments during the hours Isla mentioned. Only remote block, internal sync. The phrase repeated twice a week. Always late, always private. I tried the company Slack. No Alex in the directory, not even a guest login. He wasn't in the system. But Isla had seen him, multiple times, with smoothies. Trevor had always said his work was too technical for me to follow, that I'd only slow things down. He handled clients, I handled everything else. But now something about this Alex felt off. Too clean, too invisible. I opened our printer history. There it was, 2 weeks ago. A document marked Conflex Fins G, printed from Trevor's laptop, then deleted. I didn't know what it meant, but I saved a screenshot and forwarded it to a private email I hadn't used in years, just in case. That night, Isla asked if I'd pick her up early from Trevor's tomorrow. "He said he has another meeting with Alex," she mumbled. "I don't like him. I didn't ask why. I just said yes." Then I stayed up until 3 a.m., searching for ways a company like Hexen Vault could hide offshore transactions. And who the hell Alex really worked for? Trevor left his laptop open that morning. Not wide open, just cracked. Enough to tempt me. Enough to test me. I stood by the door, waited until he backed out of the driveway, then I walked in. The laptop blinked awake. No password prompt. Just a single tab left open. Private browser, email inbox. Alias I'd never seen before. The Cauldron at netfile.cc. I stared at the address. Burner domain. The kind meant to disappear. The inbox had only 6 messages. All with dates, all with codes. One stood out. Subject Uranix, phase 2 cleared. I opened it. Short, efficient, 3 lines. Files transferred. Clean IP. Set to trigger after October 12th. No names. Just a PDF attached. File name invoice KGX4 Sing. My hands trembled as I clicked. 4 pages. Tables of numbers. Routing paths. A Singapore bank. Trevor's initials at the bottom. Scribbled but familiar. I hit print. The printer in the hallway kicked on. Word. Coughed. Pushed out truth 1 sheet at a time. I snapped photos as each one landed. Sent them to my off-grid email. Then shut it all down. Browser closed. Laptop returned. No trace. I slid the papers into a book Isla never touched. Back row of the shelf, titled The Quiet Consumer. Fitting. That night Trevor cooked. Stir-fried shrimp and jasmine rice. I chewed slowly. He talked like nothing had shifted. As if I hadn't touched the edge of his rot. He poured me wine, refilled my glass without asking. I smiled. Didn't drink. Later, while brushing Isla's hair, she asked, "Did you see Daddy's new phone?" I looked up. "What new phone?" "The black one. He hides it in the kitchen drawer under the plastic forks." I kissed her forehead, tucked her in, waited until the house creaked into silence. Then I opened that drawer. No phone, just forks. But one thing had changed. I didn't question myself anymore. Something was happening. Something bigger than infidelity. Bigger than divorce. And Trevor had just handed me the first piece, with his own hands. The house felt colder that week. Maybe it was me, or maybe the truth had finally opened the windows. I moved through each room like I didn't belong, like I was waiting to be evicted from my own life. Trevor came home late most nights, blamed client calls, late syncs, security reviews. He kissed Isla's forehead, didn't kiss mine. He didn't need to. He thought he'd already won. I stopped asking questions, stopped pushing, started listening. He talked more when I stayed silent. Words poured out when he thought I wasn't watching. That's how I learned about final staging. That's what he called it offhand, while microwaving leftovers. He didn't know I was at the kitchen table, didn't see my hand stop mid-scribble. Final staging's ahead of schedule, he muttered. Alex said the trigger path cleared. My fingers clenched under the table. I looked at Isla's sketchbook beside me. Spirals again, tighter this time, almost choking themselves. That night I pulled the documents from the quiet consumer, laid them across the floor, each number, each code, each name that wasn't a name. I tried mapping them, tried to find a pattern. Singapore, Zurich, and one strange tag vault link, SHDW9, Shadow 9. It sounded like fiction, but I knew better. The more impossible it felt, the more I believed it. I sat there until my eyes burned, until my ears rang, until I remembered who I was before him. Before Trevor Calder, before joint taxes and joint custody and silences shaped like compromise. I used to argue in courtrooms, used to cross-examine billionaires. Now I was hiding papers in fiction books. I stood up slowly, gathered everything into a red envelope, wrote one name on the front, Sutton Reyes, Federal Financial Crimes Unit, a woman I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. But she once told me if anything ever smells too clean, send it my way. I didn't call, didn't text. I drove to the post office the next morning, dropped it in the outside books, raised the red flag, and walked away without looking back. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night, and when I woke up, I wasn't scared anymore. The red envelope was gone when I checked. Picked up with the morning run. I stood on the porch with my coffee watching the mail truck disappear around the bend. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. The decision had already been made, days ago, maybe weeks, maybe the first time he called me emotional in front of Isla, or when he took my name off the company registry. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Not until I dropped that envelope. Now I had. There was no climbing back. No pretending this was a misunderstanding. This wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. This was about survival, and not just mine. Isla had asked me the night before, "Why don't you look at Daddy when he talks?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, but I wanted to. I wanted to tell her that love isn't supposed to make you invisible. It's not supposed to erase your name off websites or lock you out of accounts you helped build. It's not supposed to twist silence into obedience. I walked back inside, sat on the floor in Isla's room, picked up one of her markers, drew a line across the sketchbook, straight, unbroken, deliberate. The point of no return isn't always a moment. Sometimes it's a mood, a shift in breath, a woman blinking twice, then never looking away again. Trevor thought I was folding, but I wasn't folding. I was loading, and when this detonated, he wouldn't hear it coming. The email from Sutton came 3 days later. Subject line received, confirmed, no greeting, no fluff, just 3 lines. We've reviewed the packet. You did the right thing. We're watching him now. I stared at the screen for a long time, then shut the laptop, and started planning for court. I had 10 days. 10 days to stay quiet, 10 days to act like I wasn't holding a grenade in my purse. Trevor stayed calm during those days. Too calm. He thought I'd folded. He saw my silence as surrender. He brought Isla flowers from the grocery store, kissed the top of my head as he walked by. I wanted to slap him, but I smiled. I let him believe he was still ahead. I cleaned the house, let him see me scrubbing windows, let him feel in control, and in the quiet I gathered. All the bank statements I'd printed from a friend's office, all the emails Isla didn't know she'd revealed, the calendar gaps, the alias accounts. I laid them out across the guest room floor, color-coded them, labeled each with sticky notes. By the time I was done, it looked like an evidence board on a crime show, because that's what it was. Trevor wasn't just a liar. He was laundering money, selling data, using his own child as cover. That was the part I couldn't forgive. Not the betrayal, not the erasure, but the way he folded Isla into his mess, like she was just another tool, another asset. I bought a red envelope. Same shade as the one I'd mailed Sutton. This time I slid in a single sheet, a document summarizing everything: timeline, amount, accounts, alias. I printed 3 copies, one for the judge, one for my lawyer, one I kept tucked into my blazer pocket. Backup, insurance. We arrived at court just after 8:30, Charleston Family Court, room 402. It smelled like old wood and newer grief. Trevor's lawyer stood at the front, confident, sharp suit, sharp teeth. She greeted me like we were at brunch. I nodded once, sat down. My lawyer, Malik, leaned over. You ready? I handed him the envelope. Don't open it yet, I said. Wait until I stand. He blinked, then nodded. Trevor walked in 5 minutes before the hearing. Light gray suit, no tie. Smiling like this was just a formality. He waved to Isla, who sat beside my sister. Isla didn't wave back. She looked down at her sketch pad, drawing spirals again, tighter than before. The judge entered. Everyone stood, everyone sat. The room went still. His lawyer started with the narrative: Naomi's mental state, Naomi's unpredictability, Naomi's lack of financial contribution. She spoke in polished bullets. I stared at the wood grain in front of me, counted the whorls. 3, 4, 5. Then it was my turn. Malik stood, nodded once to the judge. Your Honor, he said. My client would like to offer one final statement. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Calder, I stood slowly. My heels didn't click. I chose soft soles on purpose. The envelope felt warm in my palm. I stepped forward. My husband, I said, is not the man you see on paper. I opened the flap, pulled out the document, laid it face up on the bench. 1 page, I said. That's all it takes to change everything. The judge picked it up, read silently, then again, slower. She didn't speak, didn't blink. When she finally looked up, her face was different, sharper, colder. She tapped twice on her mic. Please bring security inside. Trevor shifted in his seat. What's going on? He asked. His voice had changed, higher, less certain. The doors opened. 2 officers walked in. One took position by the bench. The other moved toward Trevor. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like my body had been waiting for this exact second. The judge spoke again. Mr. Calder, you are not under arrest at this time, but you are now under active federal investigation. Trevor turned to me, eyes wide. I don't understand, he said. I didn't answer. Because I did. And that was enough. The bailiff stood by the door, silent, still, but not casual. He shifted once toward Trevor's side. Trevor noticed. His smile cracked. Your Honor, this is absurd, his lawyer said. There's been no evidence submitted prior. The judge held up 1 finger, didn't say a word. Her silence was the loudest sound in that room. She turned back to Malik. You've reviewed this document, Malik nodded once. And you confirm these accounts exist? Yes, Your Honor, all verified. Trevor tried to stand. The officer beside him placed a firm hand on his shoulder. He sank back down. That was the first moment I saw fear in his eyes. Not panic, not embarrassment. Fear. He looked at me. No more smirking, just confusion, like I'd become someone else entirely, like I'd stepped out of character. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Let him look. Let him study the woman he thought he could erase. The judge leaned forward. Until federal review concludes, this court places all shared assets on freeze. Trevor flinched. I run a company, he snapped. I have employees, clients. Then I suggest you explain to them why your Cayman account moved 6 figures 2 days ago. His jaw locked. You could hear the click. I closed my eyes for 1 second, not to breathe, just to feel. The judge continued. In light of this evidence, custody will be temporarily awarded to the mother. My sister gasped. Isla dropped her pencil. Trevor stood again. This time the officer didn't place a hand. He stepped forward. You're not under arrest, the judge repeated. But if you make one move that threatens this process, that can and will change. He stopped moving, but his eyes didn't. They darted to me, to Malik, to the judge, back to me. He mouthed something. I couldn't read it, didn't try, because I no longer cared what he had to say. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Calder, do you have anything else to add? I shook my head once. "No, Your Honor." She banged the gavel. The sound echoed deep into my chest. She stood. So did we all. The courtroom broke into quiet murmurs. Trevor didn't move. His lawyer whispered fast and low. Malik touched my arm. "We need to talk outside." We walked into the hallway. My legs felt lighter, not shaky, just unlocked. He turned toward me. "You understand what you've just set in motion?" I nodded. "I do. This goes beyond family court, Naomi. I know." He looked at me for a long second, then smiled. "You scared the hell out of him. He deserves worse. I think he'll get it." My sister came out next, Isla clinging to her side. She ran to me without a word, buried her face in my coat. I held her tight. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She had felt it in the shift of air, the silence, the way grown men moved like hunted things. I kissed the top of her head. "I've got you," I whispered. "I'm not letting him take you from me." She looked up, eyes red but clear. "Are we going home?" "Not yet," I said. "There's something we need to do first." Malik offered to take us. We declined. I didn't want anyone else in that space. Not yet. I drove. Isla rode quiet beside me, holding my hand. We pulled into the old parking lot off Broad Street, Federal Building, the place where I used to work, and where somehow this all began. The woman at the desk looked up. I handed her the copy of the document. "This is a follow-up," I said. "My name's on file." She nodded, typed something into her system, then picked up a phone. After a beat, she hung up. "You can go in. Agent Reyes is expecting you." Sutton met me in the hallway. Same steel gray blazer, same voice like cut stone. "Been a while, Calder. Too long." We walked into the room together, left Isla in the waiting area with juice and markers. She handed me a folder, thicker than I thought it would be. "We've been looking at him for months," she said. "You just gave us what we needed. What now?" We go deeper. We pull threads. We knock on every door. I nodded. "You'll have protection," she added. "He won't come near you again." I stared at the folder, at the life he built on secrets, and at how fast it began to crack. "He's not my biggest fear anymore," I said. "Good," she replied, "because now he's ours." We left the Federal Building just after noon. The Charleston sun felt too bright, too loud. I let Isla wear my sunglasses. She said they made her feel invisible. That sounded about right. We walked to the car in silence. The silence felt full, not awkward, not afraid, just full. My phone buzzed 3 times before I started the engine. Malik, my sister. Then an unknown number. I didn't answer. Not yet. The courthouse had been quiet when we left, but not for long. News travels fast in Charleston, especially when federal officers escort a tech CEO through the lobby. By the time we got home, our street had cameras, neighbors standing in driveways, pretending to water plants, pretending they hadn't seen the headline. CEO under federal investigation, family court interrupted by police presence. The story hadn't named me, but it would. Eventually, it always does. I walked Isla inside, closed the blinds, sat her on the couch. She looked at me. Did he really do all that? I didn't lie. Yes. Her eyes didn't fill with tears. They filled with something heavier. Not grief, not confusion. Something like recognition. She nodded once, then went upstairs. Didn't slam the door, didn't scream, just vanished into her art. I stood in the kitchen, poured water, didn't drink it. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail this time, Trevor. His voice sounded smaller. "Naomi." "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." Then quieter. "I didn't think you'd win." I deleted it. Didn't listen to the end. The next call came from a reporter. I declined, then blocked, then again. By the 4th call, I answered. Only 1 sentence, no comment. But I'm not done. Then I hung up. Malik came by 2 days later. He brought coffee and papers. "Judge needs confirmation of asset freeze. Your signature." I signed without reading. I already knew. Everything that mattered now lived in folders. Evidence folders, custody orders, witness briefs. We sat on the porch, didn't speak for a while. Then he asked, "You feel any better?" I shook my head, then nodded. Both were true. I'd won. But the wind felt like glass in my hand. Sharp, necessary, but not soft, not healing. Malik stood. "You need anything, time?" He left me with that. And I sat with it, time. A week later, I heard from Sutton again. Brief message. We have enough for formal charges. He's being taken in. I stared at the text, read it 3 times. No smile came. No tears either. Just breath. Deep, full, uninterrupted. Isla walked in 10 minutes later, her hands smudged with charcoal. She handed me a drawing. It was a woman standing in the center of a storm. No umbrella, no coat, but her feet were planted, her spine straight. I looked at Isla. This me? She nodded. Yeah. But I think next time, you'll be holding fire. That night I slept. No dreams, just stillness. I woke up with sun on my face, and no weight on my chest. The next court date was set for March. Full asset division, public hearing, no more secrets. Trevor didn't show. His lawyer requested remote appearance. The judge denied it. You showed up for the money, you show up for the consequences. The gallery was full, journalists, employees, a few board members from Hexen Vault. None of them sat on his side. I sat alone. Didn't bring Malik this time. Didn't need him. Trevor walked in late. Wrinkled suit, face pale. He didn't look at me, didn't try. The judge asked if he understood the charges. He said yes. Asked if he disputed the evidence. He hesitated, then said no. Asked if he had anything to say. He looked at me then, just once. I underestimated her, he said. Then sat down. The room stayed quiet. No one argued. No one interrupted. The judge signed the order. Everything froze. Everything divided. Everything exposed. I walked out before the cameras caught up, got into my car, turned on the radio. A gospel song came on. First lyric. She rose without noise, but the ground felt it. I didn't cry, didn't cheer, just drove home. My name wasn't Naomi Calder, the CEO's wife. Not anymore. I was just Naomi, and that was finally enough. 6 months passed. No courtrooms. No subpoenas. No microphones. Just mornings. Quiet, uncomplicated, real. Isla started smiling in photos again. Not the tight-lipped smile, the real one. She took up watercolor, painted a series called Recovery. She didn't explain it. She didn't have to. I framed 2 of them in the hallway. The third one sold, to a local gallery. She asked if she could keep the money. I said of course. It was hers. Everything she makes from here on out will be hers. I started working again, part-time. Legal advocacy for women navigating financial abuse. The stories hit too close. That's why I stayed. Because they hit close, and because someone once told me, don't forget what almost broke you. That's where your power lives now. I haven't seen Trevor since the final hearing. He took a plea, minimal time served, maximum reputation destroyed. His company crumbled. Investors pulled out. One of his former engineers started over, built something better, hired all the people Trevor underpaid. That helped. A little. Isla asked last week if she could change her last name. I didn't answer right away. I just pulled her into a hug. Held her like I had the first time newborn in my arms. Heart breaking wide open, she whispered, I just want to belong to us. You already do, I told her. But if a name helps, we'll do it together. The sound of Isla's laughter on the porch felt like breath returning to old walls. Not victory, just quiet life reclaiming its space. Sometimes closure doesn't come in courtrooms or headlines. It comes in knowing your name still means something, and your child feels safe saying it. If this story stayed with you, share what helped you begin again. You're not alone in it.